on the Ice Explorer, reversing up to go down. There's one coming back off the glacier. Oh, there's loads of them. Loads and loads and loads of them. Oh, they're different companies, yeah.
They were driving it right now. I always like to check that out. They're built by a company called Foremost, based out of Calgary, Alberta, and there's only 23 of these Ice Explorers in the whole world, and 22 of them are owned and operated by Brewster, this company. Does anyone want to take a wild guess where that one other Ice Explorer might be? Churchill, that's a good guess. Not quite. It's actually in Antarctica. Owned and operated by the US government and used to shuttle people from the airport to the Science Research Center. And we also have 9 wheelchair accessible Ice Explorers at the ice field, and this is one of them. That's pretty cool. So you might not believe me, but we're actually on the glacier right now. Doesn't look like it with all this rock around us, but it's just a thin layer of rock on top of a thickness of 30 meters or 100 feet of ice already. This is called the ice core moraine, and it moves with the glacier. So as the glacier advances down the valley, all these rocks are getting a free ride down to the toe or tip. And if you look out your windows, you can see the ice glimmering through in some spots. Cool. Now we're heading into a big puddle here. This is the tire wash. It sounds ridiculous, but it's actually very important that we clean these tires off before we head out onto the glacier, because a thin layer of dirt absorbs more heat from the sun and would increase melting. So in order to maintain our road, we need to keep it as clean as possible. So here we are, folks. And that is 1 kilometer wide. If you look on the ice right now, everything you can see, this is only 2% of all the ice that makes up the interior of the ice. So there's going to be a lot of ice out there. This is only 2% right here. Now, the ice field itself is 325 square kilometers, or 125 square miles. That's pretty huge, isn't it? That's the same size as the city of Vancouver. Has anyone ever been there?
Yes.
Alright, cool. So how does this ice field form? Well, it is surrounded by some of the tallest mountains in the Canadian Rockies. So as warm air comes off the Pacific Ocean, it has to rise quite a distance to get over these huge mountains. And as the air rises, it cools and condenses and starts to leave precipitation in the form of snow. Now up here in the ice field, we get a lot more snow every single time. This is called accumulation. And the zone of accumulation is right up on top of the ice field. So what happens is year after year, the layers of snow pile up one on top of the other. And the top layers pack and compress the bottom layers into glacial ice. So it's not a frozen body of water, it's packed and compressed snow like a snowball. Now once the glacial ice gets about 32 meters thick, it starts to flow, and it takes the path of least resistance. So gravity pulls it down these valleys, forming Outlet Valley Glacier.
At the top point of the ice road. People everywhere.
I'm going up there.
Glacial stream.
Realize it. And I didn't know where my water came from before I started working here, but I just knew it came out of the tap whenever I needed it. But it's important to remember that ice fields and glaciers hold the majority. I've never seen anything like it, and they described it as being an ocean of ice for as far as the eye could see. So I always like to mention a man named Walter Wilcox, because he was in the area 2 years before the Columbia ice field was discovered. And you're probably wondering, well, how come he didn't discover the Columbia ice field? Well, if you look up to the left-hand side, you'll see that pyramid-shaped mountain at the end of the valley. The weather got pretty nasty, so he decided to go behind that mountain instead in a safer pass. So unfortunately, that decision left him not the discoverer of the Columbia ice fields, so he missed out on it and walked right past without even knowing it was there. It's a bit unfortunate, but he still got that mountain named after him. That's Mount Wilcox, so you really can't feel too bad for the guy. I mean, there's not many people with mountains named after themselves. So on the left-hand side, you'll see Lake San Wapta, and you'll notice it has a cloudy, milky color to it. That's because it's glacial fed. So what happens is when the glacier moves down the valley, it crushes the underlying rock into a very fine powder called rock flour or glacial silt. And meltwater running under the glacier picks up the rock flour and deposits it into the lake. Now the more rock flour in the water, the cloudier or milkier the color is. So you can see there's lots in that lake. So much, in fact, it's disappearing. You can see the fan deltas forming in the corners there. They predict in about 25 years it's not going to be there anymore. It's kind of neat. Now, as you're driving to the Rockies, you might notice that there's very many bright blue color lakes. They're turquoise in color. They're absolutely beautiful. It's also because of this glacial silt. But of course, the concentration is less. But there's always very fine particles that stay suspended in the water, absorb most of the wavelengths of light, and reflect back the blues and greens. Alright. So folks, if you look far to the left-hand side, the furthest mountain range you can see, that's the Endless Chain, the longest uninterrupted mountain range in North America, 32 kilometers long. So if you're on your way to Jasper today, you'll drive right beside it. And on the left-hand side, you'll see that funny-looking blue machine. That's a 1958 Greyhound highway coach mounted on tracks. And that's what they used from the late 60s to the early 80s to take tours out onto the glacier. And they called it the shake and bake.
That's probably what was here when I was
Shake
here.
because those tracks are mounted directly onto the body without suspension, which make for a pretty bumpy ride. And bake, those windows don't open, which made for a pretty toasty ride. So I'm pretty excited that I get to drive one of these all day instead of one of those. Alright, so folks, your shuttle bus driver's not here to pick you up yet, but you can wait in bays 4 and 5 direct